everyone. Welcome back to the Good Doctor's discussions, recaps, and rants of season 3 of The Handmaid's Tale. I am Dr. Donnelly.
I am Dr. Hinson.
And we're here to talk about episode 9 entitled Heroic.
Yep.
They're phoning in the episode titles this season. So
I know, I was like, what? I still, even today, I watched it yesterday, but still even now before we're filming this, I was like, I'm still not sure who's supposed to be heroic in this one.
If I'm going to bet money, it's Janine, but like, I don't know.
Or Natalie. But Natalie's like, doesn't have a speaking part in this whole. Natalie's unconscious. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, summary of this episode is that it is June's slow descent into isolation-driven psychopathy, in a way.
Yeah.
Which Dr. Hinson has done a whole lot more with incarcerated persons and the psychology around that. And so we're going to let her explain that all to us later. So I'm going to blow through a quick recap with some of my snarky comments. Really excited we got Belinda Carlisle in the beginning there. Like, having this place on Earth. Okay, great.
I know.
It just kept happening, which was personally my summary of this episode. It just kept happening.
Which was June's sentiment, right? Like, It has to end. This has to end. I was like, yeah, this episode has to end too, right? Eventually, right?
Yeah, this was not this did not have economic narrative powers, this episode. It didn't. So, I mean, you know, as we watch the doctors take care of Natalie, there's some things we know clearly. They're going to refer to her as a vessel. They're going to say that the baby is their patient, not her. This reminded me a whole lot of a case in Ireland, actually, in 2013, 14, of a woman who lost her life in Galway and giving birth, and was often referred to in newspapers and such things as a vessel for the child. So,
Savita, wasn't it? Savita?
Savita, yeah. I cannot ever pronounce her surname.
No, sorry.
But I had a couple other thoughts too, like as they were kind of rolling Natalie around the bed, I was just thinking like, oh, so many of my friends with black hair say that cotton hurts their hair. Like, I understand she doesn't have any like pain receptacles, but like, could somebody get her a silk head wrap, please?
Yeah. No.
So
that would be recognizing racial difference.
Yeah, we don't do that in Bruce.
We don't do that. You forget yourself.
Yeah, I do. I'm sure I don't know what I mean. So June has been ordered to pray, kneeling in the room in front of Natalie until the baby is born. As you can imagine, this is a really dumb punishment for a lot of reasons, including that they took their most mentally unstable handmaid and put her in a situation in which she would become more mentally unstable. So 2 thumbs way up, Gilead.
Yeah, and she's already acting really, really, really super rationally, insert sarcasm. So let's isolate her some more.
Mm-hmm. It's a great idea. It's just they do nothing but good strategery. So
yeah.
Then at some point June begins, like, she snaps slowly in the first, like, you know, the half hour of the episode. So the first thing we do is we see her try to cut off the airway. Like Natalie's airway to kill her faster. What I wrote down was, in a surveillance state, would there really not be cameras in the room?
Really?
Really? No cameras in this room? Okay.
Okay.
Then, again, we're just slowly kind of descending. At one point, Sarina shows up for reasons unclear.
To pray. She comes to pray and support the wife.
Yeah. But, like, narratively,
narratively, there was no reason for her to be there.
Narratively, there was no reason for her to be there. I guess they had a budget surplus and could pay. Sorry, there's a fly in here. It's driving me nuts. I guess they had a budget surplus and could pay Yvonne's day fee that day. I have no idea. But June is at the point enough now where she uses a scalpel she dug out of the sharp objects container to try to kill Sarina. Sure, that play didn't go great. And Sarina, in one of the times in which she's a quasi-human being, doesn't turn June in for that. Yeah. Which, again, narratively doesn't make any sense to me. But, okay, we're supposed to now believe these 2 women hate each other at the core of their beings, but Sarina's not going to turn her in for, okay, fine.
And she says to her, what, like, Sarina says to June, you were supposed to be one of the strong ones.
We can't keep doing this yo-yo writer's room, man. You can't keep deciding she's 6 different people.
Yeah.
Pick a lane. Okay, so then at one point we do get a really lovely scene in which Janine is the audience surrogate.
Yes.
And tells June that she doesn't like her anymore. She doesn't like who she's become. When did you become so selfish?
Yeah.
Questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Janine has been given an eye infection for plot purposes.
So that she could show up and tell June off for being a selfish idiot.
Yeah. And in a really weird, also, they don't know how to talk about Aunt Lydia moment. Aunt Lydia scolds Janine for having her hair over her face and being vain, and at the end says there's nothing wrong with looking your best. So I'm real glad there's continuity in this show.
Yeah, nothing is uglier than vanity, is what she says to Janine. Because I wrote it down because I was like, what is this? Yep. And then turns around in the end and goes, nothing is wrong with wanting to look your best.
And gives her a bright red eye patch. And honestly, at that point, I just put my head down on my desk and was like, I am officially paying closer attention to this show than the writers are.
Yeah, because what they showed us in the last episode with the Lydia flashback was that she really does believe vanity is a sin and always has believed that.
And so is it just that she sees Janine as her daughter? Like, okay, guys, this should make sense. We're 3 seasons in.
Pick a lane. You've spent 30 episodes on these characters, 32 episodes on these characters.
Pick a lane.
Make a decision.
Again, and this is my broken record this season, right? I don't trust that the narrative shifts are intentional. I firmly believe they are lazy.
Yeah.
And so, let's talk about this woman that treats Janine as a daughter, but then beats her mercilessly in front of all the commanders. How can that be this? Oh, interestingly, maybe she's doing that. No, they just needed her to do 2 different things in 2 different episodes, I swear.
Yeah.
Back to this one. We have a really interesting conversation with the doctor who comes in to bandage up June's hand, because after she tried to kill Sarina, it was all bloody.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a really interesting conversation about that essentially tells me that the doctor may not be 100% into Gilead.
Yeah, I wrote down the not so bad men who still uphold oppression was my note.
Yeah, he's part of the benevolently violent patriarchy.
Yes.
So, and I think on a level, he does if they've told him that the patient is that his patient is the baby, then he's going to keep that Hippocratic oath to the baby. And there's not a small number of physicians around the world that believe that same thing right now, as we've learned over the last several years, especially with the aforementioned case of that woman in Galway. So there were 2 particular conversations in the doctor's, little snippets of dialogue in that doctor conversation with June that I found really fascinating. One is when he asks June when she started having suicidal ideations. And Dr. Hinson pointed out that was him kind of giving her possibly a out in a way. Hurting other people is going to get her on the wall, but thoughts of suicide perhaps will get her treatment because they can't risk her womb. And that is probably why the doctor is motivated that way. I think it was the show telling us oh, hey, by the way, this slow descent into a completely different character, that's been her self-sabotage to get on the wall this whole season. She's been self-sabotaging. And if that's the case, she's not going to stop just because she had an interesting conversation with a doctor.
Yeah, I find that really interesting because we just discussed this offline, and that isn't what I got from that scene, but I can see it. And if they're using that to explain June's inexplicable behavior, that's an explanation for it, but they still haven't shown us in detail why.
No.
And one of the things, because he asks her, right, how long have you had these suicidal thoughts? And she said, since I realized I probably won't see my daughters again.
And when was that show? At what point?
Yeah, like viewing audience, subscribers, wonderful people at home, raise your hand if you thought there was an explicit moment in which the show communicated to us that June thought she was never going to see her children again. Like, I never saw it. It could have happened. There could have been moments where they could have given June that internal monologue where she's despairing, particularly after Sarina's betrayal. I think would have been a great moment for that internal monologue. But they didn't show us. I didn't think June had given up. June was still frantically trying to see Hannah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
So, like.
Okay.
Okay. Continue.
This whole episode, I just shrugged my shoulders a lot and went, okay. And? Okay. So the next interesting thing, the other thing is that the doctor says that he is going to honor the handmaid's life by saving her child.
Yeah.
And asks June how she's going to honor her daughters.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting question that, again, didn't get answered, and June will probably never answer it for us. But it's a really interesting question.
I think toward the end of the episode shows us she's going to honor her children by getting out as many children as she can. I guess.
Sure. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
She still has no plan, but at least she's admitting that now.
Yeah.
So, like, religiously, the only really interesting, I mean, clearly, like, you guys know that the liturgy that Aunt Lydia did during that kneeling scene is crap and isn't a liturgical reality in any current denomination. I found the conversation with the girl in the hallway really interesting because the pray hard and they'll be healed narrative is still very present and is not still, but is currently very present in a lot of faith systems. And is, of course, a very damaging narrative for people because that is not really how healing works. So it's been very, very damaging. The idea of consent, the idea of will, and the idea of choice that June kind of enters into the conversation is so far outside of that child's life paradigm that she can't really handle that. Not even developmentally, if she was in the West, would she possibly be able to know how to answer that question? Because we're supposed to believe she's 11, maybe.
Yeah.
11, 12. So, like, that's not you don't have abstract thought at 11, 12, not really. And so, like, all of that's very difficult. And then at the end, like, she's giving, of Matthew, they deliver the baby. I was so pleased for Natalie that it was a boy. And they deliver the baby. And then, of course, June's allowed to go home because now, Natalie's just a vegetable on a machine. And she goes outside and she asks, and she has some sort of revelation due to freckled child, or I don't know. They don't really tell us. I think we're supposed to assume freckled child, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think it was freckled child. And then I thought about this again because I didn't realize it when I was watching it, but I thought about it again today when I was reflecting. Because then when she walks outside in the rain, she's passed by more girls going in. So
yeah.
All the girls that are coming of age for their menarche exams. So I think it was the combination of Natalie having a boy.
Yeah.
Contrast that with immediately meeting that wee girl Rose, who is a girl and, not aware of any other choice besides becoming a child bride. And then seeing more of those girls. I think it was like compounding, I guess. I didn't feel like I feel like I had to do too much work to get there. But I feel like that's where they wanted.
Season 3. We're doing the work for the writers. Yeah.
We're doing a lot of the work for the writers because they're not doing it. Yeah.
I despair. So then June makes the really interesting choice to go back in, asks Aunt Lydia if she can sit with Natalie, which is something I think season 1 June would have done.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that was lovely to see in a way.
That's the first time she called her Natalie as well, as when she sat down.
Yeah, and so that conversation felt like, oh, this is why I love this show.
Yeah.
These conversations. Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, there you are. There you are, June. Welcome.
There you are, June. There you are. I see you.
So good to see you. You're the one Nick fell in love with.
Exactly.
So, eyebrows. Where are you?
Where's eyebrows? Again.
Show me Chicago. And then that's kind of it. So I didn't watch the preview for next episode. Did you?
I did. Yes.
Okay.
Intentionally so that I could talk about it. We appear to be back in Washington, D.C. We get more SVU.
Okay.
And
Well, that's one of the things we asked for.
Commander Winslow and Commander Waterford have some sort of plan for Commander Lawrence, which makes me nervous. They weren't clear if they're gonna, like, it looks like they might be forcing him to have a ceremony with June. I'm not sure, they're unclear. And then June gets some documents somehow that show her more of Commander Lawrence's involvement in orchestrating Gilead. What that has to do with the resistance, what that has to do with June's newfound plan to get as many children out. Maybe they're setting the stage for season 4 already, and June's not going to try and get any children out until next season. I don't know. But that was the preview for episode 10.
Okay, so episode 10. So we've got 10, 11, 12, and 13. They've got 4 more hours to make sense of this season. We'll see how they do it. But while we're still talking about episode 9.
God bless.
Dr. Hinson, you mentioned that this episode made sense to you. It just bored me. Yeah. So can you explain why I shouldn't have been bored? Because I feel like I took the childish way out. So unpack this for me.
Oh, no. I still wrote boring in my notes.
Okay, good.
Because I feel like, and what I said to Dr. Donnelly offline before we started filming was, like, I feel like reflecting, I've had a day now, a whole 24 hours to reflect on this episode. Reflecting on what it did, I think it was necessary to have this kind of episode that was entirely internal to June, almost. And that she had to do this work to get out of this position of being lost, as she finally articulates. Whether it's that she was, unconsciously suicidal, whatever, she was lost from the person that we all knew, which we all had been articulating for the last couple of episodes. A lot of our subscribers had been talking about how frustrated and angry and upset they were at the choices June was making. And obviously Dr. Donnelly and I were as well. So I think they had to do this work, but only because they haven't been doing this work in all of the other episodes, which I found really frustrating. And that's the part that I found boring too. It was too long.
Yeah.
We could have done just the key scenes of this. We could have utilized, like, what's it called when they collate scenes, like, together?
Montage? We could have montaged it.
We could have montaged a lot of the slower moments with Natalie so that we still got the key moments with the doctor.
Yeah.
With June seeing all the girls parading by, because I think that was a cumulative effect. She didn't understand why she kept seeing the girls. They reminded her of Hannah.
That whole 9. Yep.
Hearing the song, she's going crazy. And then she overhears it's for their menarche exams, and she kind of has that, oh, fuck, I know what this is for moment. But that could have been a couple of montages, and we could have done 25 minutes of that and 25 minutes of, I don't know, pick another plot that you've talked about.
Take me to Chicago.
We still, Dr. Donnelly and I both talked about this. We've still not addressed any of the things we've addressed in the first 5 episodes in terms of the Marthas, the resistance, what's going on in Chicago. Hey, remember Canada and Luke and Moira? Hey, remember? And Emily? No? Okay.
Cool.
All that aside, what was interesting to me about this episode was that it was clearly a study in the psychological damage that comes from institutionalization, prolonged enslavement.
Totally fair. Yep, you're right. As soon as you pointed that out, I was like, oh, yes, it was. It was that and not just really boring.
Prolonged, control. So the purpose of enslavement, the purpose of incarceration is to control the mind and the body of the slave, of the incarcerated person. Through coercion, through manipulation, through indoctrination, through, physically controlling the spaces, the language, the dress. We've talked about all of this throughout our analysis, all of the ways in which Gilead has constructed this system of control. And through Aunt Lydia, who wields her control over June, forces her to sit in this position, literally and figuratively, as a form of punishment and control. So for me, I thought that was really interesting to see even the further breakdown of June, and the doctor kind of gives us that window by saying, like, I told them this is what happens when you isolate people. And for me, what I thought of with June was the horrific stories that we hear so much, particularly in the U.S. carceral system, about the overuse of solitary confinement.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This severe psychological traumatic effects of putting human beings in prolonged solitary confinement.
Right.
And I mean, June wasn't in a room with no windows. She was indoors with, no light, no fresh air. And we see her face, like when she walks out and just gets the rain on her face. Totally reminded me of Andy Dufresne in Shawshank.
I was about to say, that was a Shawshank moment. Yeah.
Yeah, when he gets out of the tunnel from the jail and is like, yeah, exactly. So that was her Shawshank moment. So I found it, just because of my interest in my professional background, I found that part of it more interesting. I still agree with Dr. Donnelly that I feel like it was too long. It took too long in the episode. And I still feel like, when we talked about it, parts of what they revealed about June's struggle, I was still like, oh, that's what you were showing me? You were showing me a woman who thought she was never going to see her children again? Is that
That's what she read like?
If she felt like she was never going to see her children again, why was she still ostracizing of Matthew?
There's just, and again, so like, I'm convinced
that
they're not a writer's room this season, that they just all went away to various Holiday Inn conference rooms and wrote their own episodes, because this is one of those things where it's like, okay, well, one of the reasons we love streaming shows is that supposedly they get all the scripts at once, right? Like they're not episodic like a network show, and so they're filmed more like 10-hour movies. Awesome, fantastic. It's why things like Breaking Bad and Deadwood and everything work so well. And I think the first season of Handmaid's Tale was like that. So like Elizabeth Moss knew what the finale was so that she could play it right in episode 2.
Yeah.
This entire season is reading like she's getting the scripts episode by episode by episode. So she can't make narrative choices in the same way she could before. Because I'll tell you, Girlfriend was not playing the last chunk of episodes like she was somebody who didn't know she was going to see her kids.
No. And maybe that realization came right when she...
Maybe they're trying to convince us that she didn't realize that. Go ahead, the internet's fun. We just cut out. You go.
Fun. I think perhaps in reflection, the moment they wanted us to realize that was when she started freaking out on the wall at Hannah's school. And then, Hannah disappears because of Matthew turns in June and Francis.
Sure.
So her screaming and strangling of Matthew, Natalie saying, "You bitch, you don't know what you've done." That was the moment.
Maybe. I don't like that though. Then, maybe.
So for me, it's a simple fix. Say, "You bitch, you don't know what you've done. I'll never see my
children again." Yep.
Boom, done. It's done. The work's in there. And then I start to understand, oh, this is why June is lashing out violently. Animalistically, I would say there were parts of this episode, certainly, where even when she was on the ground, she looked like, and she couldn't really sit up, she looked like she was, a hurt and a caged animal. When she shied away from the doctor, like visually, that was a really strong metaphor. And when she says two things to Natalie, when the conversation at the end that I thought were really, really useful for understanding this psychological impact of slavery and incarceration. One, I got lost, which I don't blame people. How do you not blame people? We've seen a whole host of ways that people are trying to survive through this horrible dystopian state. We see of Matthew capitulating, Natalie capitulating and just towing the line, and lots of other forms of resistance or acceptance. And then she also said, they just take everything from you.
Yeah.
And really this struck with me, particularly because also this week I watched the Netflix special that Oprah did with the exonerated 5, the men who were wrongfully imprisoned during the Central Park jogger case. And Ava DuVernay made a wonderful, wonderful show called When They See Us. If you haven't seen it, please watch it now. And this kind of documentary, like after Oprah show, it was basically like an Oprah show, where she talked to the exonerated 5. And she said, do you feel like you have closure now? Like you've won a settlement, you've been exonerated, all of this. And I think it was either Kevin Richardson or Raymond Santana, I'm not going to remember which one, said no, because they took so much from us. They took so much from us, we'll never get that back. What they took from us, we can never get back. And so June saying they just take everything from you really, for me, like resonated with this idea of prolonged incarceration, of prolonged slavery. And how do you ever get back what they've taken from you?
You don't. I mean, and trauma tells us that you become new people.
Yes. So we're watching June become a new person.
Yeah.
A potentially now a new person that is going to save as many children as she can. I don't know.
God bless.
So I thought there was a bit more meat in this episode, perhaps than Dr. Donnelly, but I still feel like there were enough problems with how they did it and how long they took to do it. It did not need to be 58 minutes to get these points across.
And I need you guys to know that in our friendship, if Dr. Hinson thinks something has taken too long,
yes,
it's taken too long.
That's very true. That's very true.
Too long.
I am a slow burner, and I am a lot
more patient than I am. Infinitely.
And a lot more drawn to kind of slower burning stories and plot lines than Dr. Donnelly, just personally. And so, yes, that's a wonderful point to make. If I thought it was too slow, then probably on the spectrum, if I'm here and Dr. Donnelly's here, most people are here somewhere, and they're going to find that it was too slow too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up for now. We want to thank everybody who's been engaging with us, especially Natalie and Roxanne, Danielle, Jean, Dee, Brenda, Cornelia, Siobhan, Annie. We have really, really loved interacting with you guys over the last little bit. I know that Dr. Hinson does most of the talking back, so you guys may think I'm not interacting or reading, but that is the farthest thing from the truth. I'm reading all of them. She just usually speaks for us because she's more articulate than I am. And so,
I wonder when there's questions about religion.
she's like, can you handle this one, please?
Good question.
But y'all, it is an honor that you give your time to us. We'll say it every week because for a while we were remiss in not saying it. So we're going to be much more careful moving forward. Thank you for giving us your time, for your engaging questions, for pushing back on us and making us think farther, as we've had to in several occasions. So that's it from us this week. We'll see you for episode 10. Lord above knows where they're going to take us in episode 10, evidently back to Washington, where I don't really want to go.
I don't care.
So fine, whatever. In the meantime, from thunderstormy and humid Philadelphia, I'm Dr. Donnelly.
From not thunderstormy, but very, very humid and very, very hot Pittsburgh, I am Dr. Hinson.
We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.